chapter house at that time was up on South Avenue, just behind the law school. And it was an old, decrepit place that we had to rent from the university. But after they had rush in early freshman year, and from then you could move into the house at any time. I happened to have empty space that freshman year, so I moved right in. And my roommate was a big, tall guy. He moved in as a freshman also. We had a houseman and his wife. He took care of the house and she took care of the cooking. And they tried to keep us in line, and they did a pretty good job, actually. To get down to the crew house, they made us walk, us coxswains, so we wouldn't gain too much weight. I weighed in at 98 whole pounds. And at training table, they would take my potatoes away from me, let me have the steak and veggies. Even today, my 5-year reunions, I usually go down to the crew house. They have an open house on Saturdays, and they've actually let me take a boat out and cox it there. And the last time, I think it was 5 years ago, I took a boat out. It was a brand new boat. And why they trusted me with it, I have no idea. But we got along, and I remember the guy who was rowing stroke. He had emphysema, and after about 20 strokes, he had to say, "Hold it, way enough. I got to rest for a minute." But we went up the inlet and then back down a couple of times, and it was kind of fun to get out there again and just ride the waves. It was that year that Al Sweeney and Tom Gargan and a couple of others had what they called the Moose Club. And the Moose Club decided, "Storm, you got to go through sorority rushing." So that's what I did. They took me down to this hotel, got the local barber to give me a wig and do the curlies and all that sort of stuff, and then they got me a dress and filled me out, so to speak, and set me loose during the sorority rushing. Well, I made it through 3 houses, and then at the 3rd house, this one gal talked to one of the heads of the house, said, "I know this person. He's in my English class." So that was the end of that. So I had to leave the group, but they all gave me rush cards. So I could have joined a sorority if I wanted to. There, of course, was Zink's down there, I think Aurora Street. Right above that was where the Cornell Widow magazine had their office. So, you go down there, you work on the magazine for a while, you go down to Zink's, you have a drink or two here or there. Another watering hole we liked was Jim's place, which was across from the American Legion Hall, which used to be the original Zete house. So that was kind of interesting. And there were several other. There was a diner down there near the railroad tracks owned by Obie. And Obie knew everybody, and you could walk in and say, "Obie, I'll have the regular." And he'd dish up scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. So and it was a lot, I'd say smaller, less crowded, a lot less crowded than it is now. It was the end, in 49 after the war, so there were a lot of veterans in the house. And actually, we had a fellow that was head of the ROTC unit up here, Clyde Raybuck. He was a captain, and he joined the house at the time. So a lot of veterans, and there were a few of us neophytes that kind of looked up to these guys and said, ooh, ah, I don't want to go into the Army. So that's why I went in the Navy. My first ship was a gasoline tanker out of Pearl Harbor. And we used to go to Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Bikini, to deliver aviation fuel. Now, the AOG, small tanker ships, could get over the reefs. The larger oilers, the AOs, couldn't get in there. So that's why we were tasked with delivering aviation fuel down there. Then we had a 6-month stint out in the Philippines at Subic Bay. And from there, we went to Hong Kong, we went to Taiwan, we were at Guam, and after 6 months, we came back, and at that time, they didn't have any Loran out in the Pacific, and radar was doing no good. We had to shoot the stars, except we had a typhoon following us. So we had to dead reckon all the way back to Pearl Harbor, and we missed it by 1 mile. So got in there. But I enjoyed Pearl Harbor very much. I bought a surfboard and became a surfer out there on Waikiki Beach. And you could store the surfboard for $5 a month. Very cheap. Now you go to Hawaii, get a surfboard, it costs you $5 just to rent it for an hour and a half. So after a couple of years there, I got transferred to a destroyer out of Newport, Rhode Island. And from there, I got over to the Mediterranean, down to the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, and around to Bahrain, where it was very hot. So we got back, got up through the Suez Canal. Our sister ship didn't make it. 5-day war started, and we had to go into Haifa and evacuate Americans out of there. And one of them took over my stateroom and had a baby. So I had to sleep out on deck. So it was kind of interesting. But we went to Istanbul, Turkey. We went to Palma de Mallorca, Barcelona. I was in the service for 4 years. They let me out a month and a half early so I could come back to law school, which worked out nicely. And I stayed in the reserves for all of 21 years, so I got my pension now, which is very handy, very nice. And of course, I can shop at the PX and get good food, and I get all my medicals and whatnot at the medical center on base. And I live about 3 miles away from the base down in Savannah, Georgia. Our law school class was kind of experimental. They only had 63 people in the class. It was a very small class. And most of the guys were, B+ and A- students. I was a high C+ student, but they had to take me because they accepted me before I went in the Navy. So that worked out. And I found after being in the Navy for 4 years, and everything has to be done spit, 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 and you learn a job, they say, okay, this job, we're going to give you a different job. So you learn a new job, and you have to learn it quickly. I found this transposed over to my law school studies, and I could go through and take notes, and I typed them up every afternoon. So I had a notebook probably about 1 inch thick of typed notes. And in the evenings, I was through studying, and I'd sit down in Cascadilla Hall and play bridge with the girls. So that worked out very nicely. So when it came at the end of law school, and I had to study for the board exams, the comprehensives, I had my notebook of typed up notes, and I could go through a course in 2 or 3 hours and learn everything. These guys who tried to write longhand with their hen scratches, they had to take 6 or 8 hours and try to figure out what the heck they wrote. So it all worked out pretty well. And I passed the bar, in both Connecticut and New York, first time round, and took the summer off and went down to Chile and went skiing. Met several other people down there who are still friends, and came back, moved to Rochester, New York, and I was working for the princely sum of $50 a week back then. And of course, inflation wasn't quite what it was now. And I actually was able to buy a car on my $5,000 a year salary. I lived up in Rochester, New York, and that's where I practiced law for 20 some odd years. So that was an easy haul to come down every 5 years for the undergrad reunions, and then 2 years later for the law school reunions every 5 years. And I happened to be able to make every one of them. Well, they had issues with the administration after they were funneling tomatoes into Balch Towers, and they were about ready to kick them off campus. And Tom Jewett and we were both lawyers, so we were on an advisory committee and telling the boys to shape up and how to do it and what you have to do, et cetera, and so forth. And eventually they became pretty much of a powerhouse on campus. You know, held all kinds of student government offices. They were in a lot of extracurricular activities. So, you know, that was pretty good, the late 50s and early 60s. But the kids from the middle 60s into the late 60s, they've just disappeared off the face of the earth. You don't see them around at all. But they've come back. The new guys have come back in the 70s and brought the house back up to standards, which has been kind of nice. And, you know, Tom and I and a few others on the elder committee would come down and read the Riot Act and, you know, give them suggestions and say, try this, try that, you know, and it seemed to work, and they're in very good shape now. I think just socially, getting along with people and helping them out, and maybe you know, steering them in the right direction, whatever. You know, trying to be a half decent example anyway. Don't be shy about getting involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. You make a lot of friends that way, and you can build up really future clients for your business. And maybe not them, but friends of theirs. And that works out, and it will help you in your business relations further on down the stream. So that basically is it. Stay honest. Don't do anything crooked through it, but, you know, do the right thing, and you'll come out ahead.